Have you ever been really inspired to do something creative and you get started, but you find yourself trailing off halfway through? Some of the reasons why I think this happens to people is because we start creating out of a sense of wanting to be heard rather than having something to say. I want to talk a little bit about that in this video. Having something to say feels like giving, whereas wanting to be heard feels more like receiving. Both things are extremely important because we all need to give and receive because we need to be replenished so that we can continue to give out. But as it relates to my creative process, when I have something to say, it allows me to be a bit more motivated to see things through to the end. When I just want to be heard, I don't feel as inspired or motivated to continue working on whatever I might be working on. A few years ago, I actually wrote a book. It's called The Virgins. I had my hard copy right here. But when I wrote the book, I started writing it because I had begun learning all of these new ideas, having conversations about feminism and learning more about sociology and intersectionality and a bunch of different things that were not prevalent when I was growing up. And it did start to change me. But it was difficult because the people around me didn't necessarily recognize the change and they would reinforce some of the negative foundational ideas that I grew up with. So it became really difficult to manage my new beliefs with who I was in the present because I had people who were reinforcing some of my bad habits. So I started writing this book not necessarily to talk to the people that were reinforcing these habits, but just to figure out in my own mind who I actually was and who I wanted to be. So I started writing this book because I had something to say. I wanted to say, this is who I am, this is what I believe, and this is the type of person that I've essentially become. As I worked through the process, there were a bunch of different moments where I had to be a really different person just in myself in order to even write some of the scenes. I heard a really good quote a long time ago. In order to write the book that you want to write, you have to become that person. And in the process of me writing that book, I definitely did become a different person. And I found out a little bit more about myself the more and more I worked through the process. Now, I've tried a bunch of different times to write other books. I've been writing stories for a very, very long time. The only one that ever materialized into an actual book is when I had something to say. Before that, I feel like I just wanted to write because I wanted to be heard. I always got the praise for being a good writer. There were a lot of people who told me that I was really good and it fed my ego. It made me feel good. So I wanted to write a book just so I could say I wrote a book, and all of those people who had congratulated me and gave me compliments would be able to hold up a book and like, hey, you know that guy we said was a good writer? Look at this book that he wrote. I found that their compliments, as much as I really loved them, they did not carry me through the process of creating. And in a lot of ways, they actually stifled me from seeing the work through because I had already got the praise and the compliments before I had actually finished anything. And I think that is one of the dangerous aspects of wanting to be heard and having people actually indulge you. Once you get that praise or validation from whoever it might be that's important to you without even completing a project, it eliminates the necessity for the actual project because you don't really have a reason to want to be heard. You just want to be heard. Whereas with being inspired and really having something to say, it doesn't necessarily matter as much to you if people are validating what your opinion might be or your form of expression because it's all about expressing you and what you feel. So whether or not people agree with it, you'll constantly see it through. Now, I started writing not really with the purpose of even putting the book out. I just wanted to figure out who exactly I was becoming and why those ideas set root in me so strongly. But as I worked through the process of mapping out where I wanted to land, because I did have an idea of who I wanted to be at the end of my story, what type of person I wanted to be in my relationships, in my family, for my friends. I kept that picture in mind. So when I thought about the ending of my story, I always held that idea in the back of my mind. That was what I had to say. So in all of those days when I was working towards just typing away and typing away, sitting in my room for hours in the dark in my early 20s, trying to figure out how the hell am I going to go from a blank page to this person in the real world that is going to be the best iteration of myself, it helped me see it through. One of the things that I think is important to note when talking about wanting to be heard as opposed to having something to say, if your idea of wanting to be heard leads you to writing a book, I don't know if you've necessarily picked the best path, because a lot of people are not reading books now. And even more, a lot of people are not buying books. So if you want to get that validation from people by writing a book, you might, stick to TikTok. Now, if you're writing a book because you just want to express yourself and you genuinely just care about telling stories, I don't think it really matters if you make money from it. But I will talk about some of the ways that I was able to generate some income. I haven't made it to the stage where I'm living off my book sales yet, but I'm working towards that, and hopefully documenting this journey will help us all get there. So talk to you next time. Thank you.